On November 9, the panel briefed the Army senior leaders and provided 9 findings and 70 recommendations. The findings of the committee identified major flaws with sexual harassment and assault response prevention program from implementation, reporting, and adjudication. Fundamental issues with Fort Hood Criminal Investigation Command field office activities that led to unaddressed problems on Fort Hood. And finally, a command climate at Fort Hood that was permissive of sexual harassment and sexual assault. Further, the committee made 70 recommendations to improve the following areas: overall SHARP program structure, Fort Hood Criminal Investigation Field Office Command activities, Army missing soldier protocols, Fort Hood crime prevention and response activities, Army-wide command climate issues, and Fort Hood public affairs activities. The tragic death of Vanessa Guillen and a rash of other challenges at Fort Hood forced us to take a critical look at our systems, our policies, and ourselves. But without leadership, systems don't matter. This is not about metrics, but about possessing the ability to have the human decency to show compassion for our teammates and to look out for the best interests of our soldiers. This report, without a doubt, will cause the Army to change our culture. I have decided to accept all these findings in whole. In response, we have created the People First Task Force to map out a plan to tackle them. We have formed a mechanism to ensure we have the right systems and resources while focusing on commitment over compliance. While the independent review focused on the command climate and culture at Fort Hood, the findings contained in the committee's report impact the entire Army of more than 1 million soldiers, 247,000 civilians, and their families. The People First Task Force will analyze the findings and 70 recommendations in the report, develop a plan to address the issues identified by the committee, and reevaluate current policy and programs. The Army will begin implementation by March 2021. The task force chairs are Ms. Diane Randon, Assistant Deputy Chief of Staff G2, Lieutenant General Gary Brito, the Army G1, and Sergeant Major Julie Guerra, Army G2. I have also signed a new missing soldier policy. The policy will assist in tracking and finding missing soldiers. It clarifies expectations and responsibilities of unit commanders and law enforcement authorities, focusing on the first 48 hours a soldier is missing. It creates new processes for soldiers reporting to duty status and casualty status, for supporting missing soldiers' families, and aids in identifying whether the absence is voluntary before calling it absent without leave. And finally, we need the right leadership. I've determined the issues at Fort Hood are directly related to leadership failures. Leaders drive culture and are responsible for everything the unit does or does not happen to do. I am gravely disappointed that leaders failed to effectively create a climate that treated all soldiers with dignity and respect, and that failed to reinforce everyone's obligation to prevent and properly respond to allegations of sexual harassment and sexual assault. Because of this, to restore trust and confidence and accountability, I have directed the relief and/or suspension of commanders and other leaders from the Corps to the squad level. I have directed the relief of the 3 Corps Deputy Commanding General for support, the 3rd Armored Cavalry Regiment Command Team, and suspended the 1st Cavalry Division Command Team, pending the results of a new investigation into the command climate of the division. In total, 14 leaders have been relieved or suspended from their positions. In addition, we are directing investigation regarding Criminal Investigation Command resourcing policies and procedures. Accountability and transparency are foundational as we move forward. We have a great deal of work ahead of us. This is an initial step to addressing and fixing these issues. Even though we are part of one of the most respected institutions in the world, living up to the American people's trust is something we have to do every day. I believe in this institution and its officers, non-commissioned officers, soldiers, civilians, and their families with every fiber of my being because of the extraordinary things they do on a daily basis. I'm confident in our leaders' ability to overcome this challenge and to continue to win our nation's wars while caring for our people. General McConville.
Well, good afternoon. We appreciate the work of the Fort Hood Independent Review Committee and the feedback that this report has given us. We own the results. And, you know, we've asked a lot of the Army and of Fort Hood over the last 19 years during continuous deployments to combat. And we know in the Army that we are not perfect. But what makes us the greatest Army in the world is that we recognize where we must change. We acknowledge our issues and we fix them. Prior to coming here, I talked to Mrs. Guillen, Vanessa's mother. And I told her that we're going to fix these issues and change the culture that allowed them to happen. I told her we must and will provide a safe and secure environment for American sons and daughters that serve in the Army. As the Secretary said, we are holding leaders accountable, and we will fix this. Tomorrow, we are briefing the Army senior leaders on this report, and we will ensure it is understood, and our plan to move forward will be implemented throughout the Army. We have been trusted to lead the world's greatest soldiers. It is our sacred duty to protect our soldiers so we can defend our nation. That is what we do. Thank you.
Leader Baldor, first question.
First question is, can you address just more broadly why it sounds as though General White is not included among those touched by the administrative actions? Why not? And then also, how widespread do you believe these problems are beyond Fort Hood? Because you seem to suggest that 19 years of war on this and maybe one of the causational factors. Is that what you are saying?
Alita, it's Ryan McCarthy. With respect to General White, he was deployed for 13 months. In our standard practice, I'd like General McConville to comment as well, but General White was deployed for 13 months. Our standard practice is that we delegate a senior mission commander to take the role of running the garrison activities. So in this case, it had been a standard practice that we've used for, I think, over a decade in the formation. With respect to the comments that we both made related to we are concerned that there could be other systemic challenges across the formation, and that's why, to the Chief's point, we're going to utilize this report as a means to look at systems and programs and also leadership approaches to how we address these difficult issues. Chief, anything you want to add?
Just on General White, I think it's really important. He did a fabulous job in Iraq over the last 13 days, and leadership is about presence. And when you're in Iraq for 13 months, that's why we appoint a general officer to be the senior commander. And as far as other issues, we're about excellence. I said we're not perfect, but we strive for excellence. We need to take a hard look at ourselves. That's why we're the best Army in the world, and that's what we're going to do. We're going to take these results. We're going to make sure that every single leader sees these results. Some will say we reflect society. I don't want to reflect society in these type of issues. I want to make sure that we have a environment where everyone is treated with dignity and respect and everyone takes care of each other, and we expect our leaders to do that, and that's what we're going to do.
We have time for one final question in the room. Louis Martinez.
Mr. Secretary General, you talked about how this is going to change the Army, but why did it take a review panel and why did it take Vanessa Guillen's disappearance and murder for you to look inward at these programs that obviously now, in retrospect, look like they've failed massively?
I think the level, the caliber of work that was provided in this independent review panel brought a fresh look and helped us look at a lot of challenges that we have had that are potentially systemic, but some of them were also within the leadership. So I think the fresh eyes and having some other support has helped us in this process. Chief, rest of me, anything you want to add?
If I could follow up, sir? Yeah. Yes, this is leadership with regards to this issue, but it sounds like the report says that SHARP is structurally not working, and that is an Army-wide program. So then why can't you say that the program itself needed complete restructuring, or why wasn't it updated regularly so that you could see that there were issues at hand?
Really, this body of work has identified things that we had not seen previously. That's why we have accepted all of the findings in whole. I previously have seen independent panels that have looked at the mishandling of nuclear weapons, or Walter Reed. A lot of great reporting, quite frankly, as well as outside fresh perspective, help us look at ourselves and see challenges that we didn't see. And you'll have them come out here in a minute, but they helped us. And that's going to help us with the institution so we can get better across the board.
Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us. I'm Elizabeth Chamberlain from Army Public Affairs. Today you'll hear from the members of the Fort Hood Independent Review Committee, Chris Swecker, Jonathan Harmon, Kerry Ricci, Kata Rodriguez, and Jack White. This briefing will last 45 minutes, ending no later than 1. Before I introduce the committee members, I have several announcements. If you RSVP'd for this briefing, you previously received an embargoed press release along with an embargoed copy of the executive summary of the report of the Fort Hood Independent Review Committee. That embargo is now lifted. Very soon, you'll receive an updated version of the press release with a second release outlining the accountability actions Secretary McCarthy just announced. The Army's new Fort Hood Independent Review website, army.mil/Fort Hood Review, will go live shortly. On this site, you'll find both press releases, a link to download the 136-page redacted report, and additional background materials. This briefing will begin with an opening statement from Mr. Swecker on behalf of the committee. Afterward, the committee members will take questions relating to the report and their findings and recommendations. For the Q&A segment, please allow me to acknowledge you before asking your question. Please provide your name and affiliation. Limit yourself to one question and one follow-up. I'll call on reporters in the room and on the phone line. I'll provide a warning when we have time for one more question. And now Mr. Swecker will read an opening statement on behalf of the committee.
Good afternoon, and thank you for attending today. My name is Chris Swecker. I'm the chair of the Fort Hood Independent Review Committee. I'm a practicing attorney in Charlotte, North Carolina. I'm also of counsel with Miller Martin out of Tennessee. And I'm retired from the FBI after 24 years, retiring as Assistant Director of the FBI. To my far left is Jonathan Harmon. He's chairman of McGuire Woods Law Firm. He is a nationally recognized trial attorney who previously served as an Army officer at Fort Hood in the 1st Cavalry Division after graduating from West Point. To my immediate left in the front is Kerry Ricci. She is a retired Army JAG officer who served 3 years at Fort Hood, including as trial counsel, and is now a senior executive serving as an Associate Attorney General Counsel for the U.S. Department of Agriculture. Just behind Ms. Ricci is Kata Rodriguez. She is a retired Marine Corps officer who served 20 years on active duty. She currently serves as Regional Director for 4 Block, which is a veteran-serving nonprofit organization. To my right is Jack White. He's a partner at FH&L law firm where his practice focuses on government investigations and civil rights claims. He served as a law clerk at the U.S. Supreme Court after graduating from West Point and serving as an armor officer in the active Army and the U.S. Army Reserve. So after that introduction, I'm going to read a very brief statement and turn it back over to Elizabeth. On July 30th, 2020, the Fort Hood Independent Review Committee was chartered by the Secretary of the Army to conduct a comprehensive independent review of the Fort Hood command climate and culture and assess its impact on the health, safety, and readiness of its soldiers and units, particularly as it related to preventing sexual assault, harassment, crime issues affecting soldiers, and missing soldier protocols. We began our work immediately. The committee members who had never met each other prior to their appointment were tasked to organize themselves, devise a strategy for the review, gather relevant facts, and complete a final report to the Secretary within 90 days. All of the members have day jobs with significant responsibilities. We couldn't cast those aside. However, we accepted this appointment based on our shared belief that an independent body could indeed assess the serious issues at hand and, if necessary, provide a roadmap towards constructive change. Each member of the committee accepted this appointment with the intention and a hope of supporting the mission and well-being of our brave soldiers. The final report was delivered to the Secretary of the Army on November 6th. We briefed the Secretary of the Army and the Army Command on November 18th of this year. Before we go any further, let me emphasize that the Secretary McCarthy, Undersecretary McPherson, and Chief of Staff McConville provided us absolute independence to do our job. We were authorized access to every available source of information, and we were provided a full Army staff, including a brigadier general, 2 colonels, several lieutenant colonels, and a master sergeant, each of whom stood ready to support our mission. Although the establishment of an independent committee of civilians to review a U.S. Army command and its actions is not unprecedented, it is extremely rare, and it reflects a sincere desire to identify the issues and address them. The Secretary and Undersecretary also approved and facilitated the addition of 5 former FBI special agents and civilian administrative support to provide much-needed assistance to the team. We visited Fort Hood for 19 days in August and September. We conducted 647 individual interviews. We did 80 group interviews, which encompassed over 1,800 soldiers, and we conducted over 140 specialized interviews of various stakeholders on and off the post. We retrieved and analyzed thousands of pages of documents, commissioned 49 formal research projects, and conducted a survey tailored for this review, which drew over 31,000 responses from the Fort Hood community, representing what we were told is 100% of the targeted audience. The review focused on the period 2018 through 2020. However, if information from the last 5 years was considered if it was deemed relevant to the review. After 3 months of diligent work, the committee issued 9 findings and 70 constructive recommendations. The report leads off with finding number 1, which states that the command at Fort Hood was ineffective in its implementation of the Sexual Harassment, Assault Response and Prevention Program, the SHARP program. This was due to underemphasis of the program outside the 3 corps headquarters and a failure to culturally integrate the program through the enlisted ranks to where almost 90% of sexual assault victims are found. The committee noted that while the Fort Hood leadership afforded the highest priority to maintaining equipment, conducting field training, and ensuring deployment capability, a series of command elements executed these duties in a manner that was at the expense of the health and safety of all soldiers, but particularly for women at the brigade level and below. This dearth of command emphasis on the SHARP program adversely impacted mission readiness in terms of morale, reenlistments, and recruitments. The committee also found that soldier accountability was not strictly enforced, and there was no missing soldier protocols for first-line supervisors. This resulted in ad hoc responses to soldiers who failed to report and may have been in jeopardy. With respect to the crime issues at Fort Hood, the committee determined that the crime environment within the surrounding cities and counties is commensurate with similar size areas in Texas and around the United States. However, serious crime problems on Fort Hood have gone unaddressed because the installation is in a fully reactive posture. Leaders across a series of commands failed to use best practices in the areas of public safety to develop and execute crime suppression strategies. The committee found that the serious crime problems on the installation at Fort Hood require proactive command action to mitigate. The committee also found that the Fort Hood CID detachment had various inefficiencies that adversely impacted accomplishments of its mission. The committee wishes to thank the Secretary of the Army, the Undersecretary of the Army, and the Army Chief of Staff, and the Army staff that they provided for the strong support they provided to this committee.